Hey, noble ones, welcome back to the Academy. So today I decided to put together a video very quickly, and personally, maybe this video won't get views, it doesn't matter, it's therapeutic at this point, because this is going to be not only a tutorial on how to actually do the 4 tones in Mandarin Chinese, but it's also going to be a rant, because I am absolutely sick of this. So everywhere you go, wherever you look, whenever you look for Mandarin tones, Chinese tones, whatever you want, that's what you get. It's this little nice little thing. Okay, so this is wrong, all right? This is wrong. And it's absurd. And I'm mostly focusing on the 3rd tone, but you'll see that I have trouble with, generally speaking, the way tones are taught. And I think it's about time to correct it once and for all, because here is the thing. This isn't a matter of, oh, but maybe it's more of like an introductory feature. So for people who are beginners, you don't want to go too much into the details. You don't want to confuse them. Just give them a very basic, simplistic idea of how tones function. And then once that's fully understood, then eventually, once they've picked up enough vocabulary, you want to teach them how the tones work in details. No, sir. This, the little green arrow that you see here representing the 3rd tone, is just wrong. So rather than teaching someone something wrong without them knowing that eventually they'll have to figure it out for themselves, how about we teach it how it is from day one? Without further ado. As you know, Mandarin Chinese has 4 different tones. Some people, they say that Mandarin has 5 tones. Well, those people are absolute morons, because the 5th tone, quote unquote, is the lack of a tone. So, how can the lack of a tone be considered as a tone is beyond me. So let's just say Mandarin has 4 tones. Now, the first tone, as we see here, it's usually indicated as a flat, high-pitched tone. Given one thing that I wish my Chinese teacher taught me when I was a university student many years ago, was that even though it's supposed to be a high-pitched flat tone, it doesn't have to be the exact pitch that she could pull off, because you see, my teacher was a little lovely lady from Beijing with the highest pitched voice that you could imagine. Thus, when she was doing the first tone, she would say something in the lines of "me." And then you would see the entire classroom of like 300 plus students with men trying to say "meh," getting as high as she could. Obviously, that's nonsense. No, the idea is go for a comfortable high pitch within your voice. The note you hit does not matter. As long as the tone is flat, ma, that's totally fine. It's not Cantonese, which has 2 different separate versions of flat. It doesn't matter. Ma, perfectly fine. Second, the 2nd tone that we see here, ma, this is usually the easiest one in my opinion, because it's kind of like as if you were asking a question. Ma? It's not a question though in Chinese in this case, because it's just the tone of the word. So for instance, a word such as ti is cha. So it's a tone, as we see here, you kind of start mid when it comes to the note that you can comfort being important here, important element that you can comfortably have as a beginning, ma, and then it goes up, ma, very quickly, all the way up to a high pitch, still not an uncomfortable one, ma. So, first tone, ma, 2nd tone, ma. Imagine it as a question. I'm going to skip the 3rd tone because this is going to take the rest of the video, but let's go to the 4th tone first. 4th tone is a tone which starts high and goes all the way low. Imagine it as you being angry. So, ma. So kind of imagine it as, what are you saying? No, absolutely no. So that's the 4th tone, okay? So we've got ma. Excellent. So that's how you do it. Typical verb is the verb to be, shi. First tone, shi, part of the word for teacher, lao shi. And then if you do it in 2nd tone, shi, you're doing number 10, right? So tones are very important in Mandarin. So now let's approach this 3rd tone, because you can see, as long as you explain that these notes, this number 5, whatever, number 3, these are just within your own register. As long as you explain that, at the end of the day, tone 1, tone 2, and tone 4 are generally well explained in this graph. But tone 3, the idea that you go low and then all the way up to 4 is nonsense. What this would be, what it would sound like theoretically, if we were to follow this, would be ma, and this is how it's often taught. Problem is, almost, I'm going to put almost there, but almost no Chinese ever pronounces it this way. There are exceptions, but in the majority of cases, if you want to sound natural when you speak Mandarin, ditch this. So this is sometimes referred to as the academic third tone because indeed it's how it's taught academically, which is why also a lot of Chinese teachers, not all of them, but plenty of Chinese teachers, including mine back in university, would teach you this. So ma, 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 ma. But no one says this. So how do they actually pronounce it? The approximate representation would be going from a 2 into a very almost flat tone that goes ever so slightly low. So I know that this doesn't sound like it makes a lot of sense, so I'm just going to do it for you. It's pronounced ma, ma. You will hear ma, 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 ma. And that's how Chinese is pronounced. So the trick is find the lowest possible tone or note that you can hit with your voice, ma. And now that you found it and it's a little uncomfortable, step it up a little. Ma, ma, ma. So the reality, what you're doing is that you are starting to go down, as you can see in the graph here, but you never really go up. And that's how the majority of native speakers pronounce it. There is a little bit of regional variety, but generally speaking, you will hear ma, 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 ma. Now, are there situations in which the full pronunciation happens? Yes, but that usually only happens when you have a third tone at the very end of an entire sentence or in complete isolation. And that's it. But in actual conversation, in the majority of cases, Chinese say hao, hao, rather than hao. Almost no one says that, okay? So as long as you figure this one out early on in your path of Chinese, you will sound a lot more natural. So let's practice this a little bit. Let's find a list of words that we can use for practice. There we go. So here we have, for practicing the first tone, 今天, today, 中国, China, 100. As you can see, I'm using the actual third tone here. 100, 100. 知道, 知道, to know. 妈妈. And this is the lack of tone, right? Kind of from a Western perspective, when you have a lack of tone at the end, you can kind of imagine it in your mind as if you are slightly stressing the syllable before. That's a good way to represent how to do the lack of tone, by the way. Imagine a word such as 学生, 学生, for a student. Now, given the idea of having words where the second syllable lacks a tone is in fact more common in continental Mandarin rather than, for example, Chinese in China, rather than Taiwan, where oftentimes rather than having the second syllable without a tone, they'll actually pronounce it as a first. So that there is a regional variety there, but this is a good rule of thumb, if you will. All right, let's practice this. 明天, ming, ming, tian. Do remember the G is not pronounced and it's only used to fully nasalize the N. 明天. 学习, these are 2 second tones. 学习, 学习. For example, 我学习汉语 or 我学习中文. When it comes to the word 中文, northern speakers tend to pronounce the W as a V. So even if you say 中文, it's okay. In standard, so 普通话, the W should be pronounced as a W. Wang, the name, rather than Wang, or War, for to play, rather than Var. But you will hear a lot of northern speakers, whether it be from Beijing or other areas, they do pronounce the W as a V, whichever you like. Then 没有, 没有, 没有. You'll hear a lot. You go to a Chinese restaurant or you go to a Chinese shop and you ask them 有没有, and then whatever the heck you're looking for. So do you have I don't know, 象棋有没有象棋 or 有象棋吗? So do you have 象棋, which is the kind of Chinese chess? They will say 有 if they do have it, or 没有. Because also the Chinese are not like, oh no, sorry sir, we don't have it here at the moment. Yet never mind. Chinese just say, no, don't have. That's just how it is. They're not being rude, they're just being Chinese. So 没有. Then 一样. Do remember the Y is not really pronounced. 一样. And then 什么你叫什么名字? What's your name? Third tone. 好吃. One of the most basic, very useful in fact, expressions. Tasty, meaning like when you like the food, of course. So you can say 很好吃我喜欢这个米饭 I like this rice, whatever the heck it is. And then 有钱 it literally means to have money, but it can also mean to be rich. The super famous 你好. Do pronounce the H, by the way. Don't make the beginner's mistake you get laughed after at. Do pronounce the H. But again, I would recommend to not do the 你好. Just go for 你好. 你是中国人吗? 你好. 对。我不是中国人，我是意大利人. Whatever. Also, ditch the whole 你好吗 because most Chinese don't use it unless they know that you were actually sick. There are plenty of other ways to say how are you rather than 你好吗. It's not that it's wrong. I mean, if you're writing a letter, I guess, but in everyday conversation, there are other ways. 最近怎么样, for instance, how are things lately? Then 可乐喜欢. I tend to put a first here, but I guess you can do 喜欢 without a tone if you want. And then fourth tone, 第一, first. You see this a lot in like books, the first lesson, first chapter, whatever. And then 问题 or 问题, problem. It can also be question. 有没有问题? 电影 is movie. 电影 it's a nice one as well. 电视 would be a TV. And then 再见 super famous. Goodbye. And 谢谢 it's one of those where you don't really. And the X is a sound in between the S and the sh. It's in between. Sh. 谢谢. Okay, so anyways, this is really my rant, kind of the end of the rant when it comes to Mandarin. You can test this with all sorts of, maybe we can do this together. Let's do a repeat after me, and then I'll call it a day, I guess. So we go, da, 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 da. I would say, that's another one. I mean, I probably have to make more. I'm a little bit all over the place here, but I'm just trying to give you as much information as possible. Is this an actual D? Not in the English sense. So I wouldn't say da. Da, that's not right. It's a sound that is in fact a little closer to a T that isn't aspirated. Now, this can be difficult for Anglophone speakers because you're used to aspirating your T's when you pronounce like ticket. Because you do t. But that one is written in pinyin with a T. And so if you are struggling to remove the aspiration from the T, then pronounce it as a D. At that point, I'd go for da. But in reality, to the Chinese, this is more of a non-aspirated T, which to me as a Romance speaker is not difficult to do. Da, 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 da. Then low. Same, it's not really a bay, it's more of a P that isn't aspirated. So to give you an example, by the way, imagine for the difference between aspirated and non-aspirated consonants, think of the word kill, which is aspirated, k, and the word skill, where the same K is not aspirated. Try and pronounce those a few times in a row, and you'll get a feel for it. So anyways, bay, 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 bay. And then me, 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 me. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed this. As I say, a little bit all over the place, but that's what it's more of a rant with some tutorial in it. But if you have questions about Hanyu or 普通话, feel free to ask. 谢谢，再见。